So what do we do about the blind then? Or who we would say are blind? Those who are applying the blindfolds. They've walked away from the church because they're not being fed, or for any number of other reasons. Or those people who think they believe what the Catholic Church teaches, but they can't get over some of these things. So if we're trying to bring them into the faith, if we're trying to reach out to the lost sheep, as Psalm 23 talks about the Good Shepherd, and bring them back, what are the 10 ways which we are not to do this? So Patrick Madrid in his book goes on to talk about the 10 mistakes we often make in trying to bring people back to the faith or trying to convert people to the faith. Number 1, Catholics do not share the faith. Sounds pretty obvious. You have to share the faith if you're going to bring people in. Now think about this. How often have we had a dinner conversation? How often are we with our family or friends, we're at a restaurant, we're at supper, and we discuss faith? How often have we had a great event in our life? We had confirmation last night. Baptisms, First Communion, reconciliation. Why don't we announce it to the world? My kid's being confirmed tonight. Well, because they won't understand it. Exactly. What a great opportunity. They pretty much open the door and say, teach me. If they don't get it, we are the ones who help them to get it. Another thing we can do, you go out to breakfast after Mass, or you go out to dinner or whatever, and you talk about what you just heard. And at times, it's not even something religious that you start out with. I know it's hard to get into the subject, but you say, hey, the Final Four is coming up, right? Oh yeah, he gave a quote from that coach the other night in his homily. Let's talk about the Scriptures. I mean, how are you talking about basketball and all? So you just get into it. Clever as serpents, innocent as doves. We walk right in there. So the first mistake we make, we don't share the faith. I'm walking down the street to the hospital the other day, and it was actually a terrible night. It was kind of misty and rainy. And I'm walking by, and these 2 Serbian guys are out smoking cigarettes in front of a pizza joint. And I'm dressed like a priest, and I have a rosary, and I'm praying the rosary, walking along. And he says, hey, preacher, pray for me. And I thought, well, he probably thinks I have a tchotchke, which is like a string, a prayer band, like they have. A prayer. It's kind of like our rosary, but they pray the Jesus prayer on it. So we start this dialogue, and he says, the church on the corner, they worship Mary. And I thought, what church is on the corner? Oh, St. Mary's. Yes, they do worship Mary there. Yes, right. No. And then I went on to explain, no, it's a church named in her honor, and this is that. A perfect opportunity. But what happens at times is when we're confronted, we stop looking at the answer. And what we say is, yes, they do worship Mary, and then we move on. Or we say, oh, yeah, I'll pray for you. Okay, we move on. But there was an opportunity there, and actually I was kind of cold and uncomfortable. I wanted to move on, but I took the time to talk to them. Now they're coming to visit me. We'll see if this materializes. But we started talking because they were Serbian Orthodox. And I think there's a Serbian Orthodox church around here somewhere. So we started this dialogue. So sharing the faith. If we share the faith, you'd be surprised at what happens. The second is kind of the same. We don't share all of the faith. We only share some of it. So for instance, if I'm talking to someone who is not Catholic, I might talk about the great fundraisers we have here at the church, or the youth ministry we have, or the Bible study. I'll talk about the building program that we're working on an elevator and everything. That's it. I won't talk about the saints because they think we worship saints, or I won't talk about Mary, or I won't talk about confession, or I won't talk about the Pope, or I won't talk about the Eucharist. Well, that's pretty much our faith there. So we're eliminating all these uncomfortable topics for the ones that are comfortable. But even so, if we're comfortable with somebody, then we might teach them our personal devotion. We'll teach them about Medjugorje and Fatima and Lourdes and Our Lady of Knock and all these other things, but we won't talk about the Eucharist, which is the center of that, they get the misconception that our faith is only this. And what about all these other controversial issues? So the third part, the third mistake we also make, which is also part of sharing the faith, is we share it for the wrong motives. I'm evangelizing to these people so that I can have 5 converts this year. And that I can go into church one day and say, see that one? That was mine. That convert was mine. That convert, oh yeah, he was a tough one. I got him in. So it's a personal thing. I want numbers. I want to get members in here. But the other part of that too is I want you to acknowledge that I am right. I want to be right. So that one day when I get you in the church and you're converted, then I can say, see how much happy you are? Wasn't I right about that? You know, it feeds our ego. So another reason, another mistake we make in trying to gather the people to the faith is we don't know the faith ourselves. And if we don't know the faith ourselves, how are we going to teach it to people? So what we're going to do is we might teach them something that we've been doing for years and we don't know why. And so they'll come up with all these questions that we don't know the background to. Or maybe we're doing things that are a personal devotion, but it's really not the theology of the church. And so when we have all these unanswered questions, and we can't answer it for them, or we don't know where to find the answers, the whole system begins to break down. And this kind of goes along with the fifth reason, or the fifth mistake we often make. We don't pray. We don't have a relationship with God. The ancient church fathers would say, Nemo datum non habet. I cannot give what I do not have. And so if I'm not praying, if I'm not close to God, if I don't have a relationship, how am I supposed to convince this person that this is the best life for them? If I don't believe in the Eucharist, and the Eucharist is the center of my faith, how am I going to convince these people that this is the body and blood of Christ? I can't do it. And so if I don't have a strong spiritual life myself, if I don't rely on the Lord in prayer, then they will see right through it. And you can usually tell that when you're talking to someone. The sixth reason that comes out is a very elementary mistake. We don't listen. Everybody has a story. We are not talking to people who are living in a bubble. These people relate with other people in other places. They have their own set of issues. We need to listen to their story. We have to understand who they are and from whence they came. And the seventh mistake is similar to that. We have to know the entire situation. So where we're meeting someone right now is they're pretty open to the church or whatever else, and maybe for the first time in their life they feel this spirituality. But chances are it wasn't always like that. So if we deal with them in the here and the now, and they're open to this, and we just kind of, shotgun approach, just throw it all up at them, without knowing the entire situation, without knowing their background, without knowing why they went away from the church in the first place, without knowing why they would never join the church in the first place. That many people, as we spoke of before, left the church because of scandal, or they left it because of feeling abandoned, or they were angry. All these reasons feed into it. And if we do not know that, and we assume something else, we're never going to bring these people back to the Lord. It's impossible. Because we haven't listened to them, and we haven't understood the whole situation. The eighth mistake that we often make is we are more Catholic than the Pope. That if the Pope were here celebrating Mass, we would find something wrong with that. That his letters, his encyclicals, are not Catholic enough. What's the matter with this guy? I remember in seminary very vividly, we were having a discussion in morality about ecumenism. Ecumenism is where we have dialogue with Protestants and other Christian communities. And the professor said, which of you seminarians can define ecumenism? And this guy raised his hand. I can still see it. He lasted a semester. But he raised his hand and he said, ecumenism means convert or go to hell. All right. That was diplomatic, wasn't it? And yet, you know, more Catholic than the Pope, this guy. It's a mistake we made. If we are holier than thou, then we are like these guys in the gospel, who are giving this blind man the third degree. We are the holy ones. We are under Moses. We know the law. And it says the Messiah will cure a man that was born blind. But this is impossible because he did it on the Sabbath. They are holier than Jesus, if you can imagine that. They are holier than he is. And that's why they were losing people by the hundreds. To this man, who never came off as holier as thou, he welcomed everybody. And because he welcomed everybody and he did not lord it over him, people flocked to him. And they thought he was holier. The ninth reason is we cannot memorize biblical verses. And so we feel inadequate. And so we don't even try. So the mistake we make is, I don't know enough about the Bible. I can't memorize these verses. Don't waste your time memorizing verses. Especially if you don't understand what they mean or where to find them. I get guys who are crazy enough or dumb enough to knock on a priest's door to try and convert me. And they know all the scriptures. But as soon as I say, what does it say in Greek? Then they look at me like I'm speaking Greek. What does it mean? No, that's what your English translation means, or that's what your memorized verse, that's what you were taught it means, but let's look at the original language and see what it really means. You can memorize the whole Bible and it won't do you a bit of good if you don't understand what it means. It's so much more important to have a lived faith, a lived scriptural faith, than it is to memorize a soliloquy. Honest to goodness. I memorized a soliloquy from Shakespeare when I was in high school. But if I didn't understand the true meaning behind it, it would have been a pointless exercise in memory. So we can't be so consumed with what we do not know in the Bible that we do nothing. So don't worry about memorizing verses. Worry about knowing what they mean and where to find them. The 10th mistake that we make, the number 10 of the top 10 list, we seem to forget that it's the work of the Holy Spirit. Conversion is the work of the Holy Spirit, not our work. The job of the Messiah was taken, and so is the job of the Paraclete. And sometimes, if anything, we get in the way of the Holy Spirit. But to allow the Holy Spirit to channel power through us, to use us as an instrument, is a great thing. And so we cannot forget that it is the work of the Holy Spirit to convert these others. These two grave reasons, mistakes that we make in trying to bring the sheep back to the fold and not being fed, thinking that this should be something for us as opposed to something we do for God. If we can make these errors right, if we believe what we say we believe, and know that the Eucharist has everything that we need, that we are offering true worship to God, if we can eliminate these mistakes that we make, usually in the name of the ego, or in the name of a preoccupation or a worry about inadequacy, then we have the potential to be evangelizers, to be the one who is sent to the pool of Siloam, which means the one who is sent, and to rescue these sheep in the same way that the Good Shepherd did, that he went out and